Hello again, it's your friendly neighborhood host, JT Wheatley, back for another episode of the History of Comics podcast, this time with part 2 of the life of Thomas Nast, the creator of the modern political cartoon. When we last left off, Thomas Nast had grown to be one of the greatest political cartoonists of his era, helping champion the Union cause during the American Civil War, while also taking down the infamous Boss Tweed, who ran the corrupt Tammany Hall in pretty much New York City for many years. Now we pick up where Nast is going as his highest peak starts to see his downfall. Thomas Nast would also play a role in national politics, throwing his talent behind the presidential elections with his cartoons as a lifelong Republican. Thomas Nast would help General Grant get elected in 1872 by attacking his opponent, Horace Greeley, who was a frequent target of Nast during the Tweed campaign, even depicting a cartoon of him whitewashing Tweed's many crimes. Nast viewed Grant as the honest soldier who helped save the Union and attacked his detractors at every turn. His politics were so biased, he even refused to attack Grant's administration despite numerous scandals. In return, when Nast visited Washington in the summer of 1872, he was given a hero's welcome by Grant and his supporters, with rumors circulating that Nast was being paid by Republicans to provide his support. That same year, Thomas Nast and his wife moved to Morristown, New Jersey, where they would raise a family which eventually included 5 children. The Democrats would attempt to counter Thomas Nast's influence as a political artist, bringing over a well-known artist, Matt Morgan, from England to counter Nast's cartoons. Ironically, he went to work at Leslie's Illustrated Weekly newspaper, one of Nast's original employers. Both artists' styles were similar, and the challenge incensed Nast, whose attacks on Grant's opponent Horace Greeley and his supporter Charles Sumner was so intense Harper's editor George William Curtis asked Nast to hold off. It was one thing to attack the corrupt official like Tweed, but Sumner was, by all accounts, a decent political official, even if his politics didn't align with Nast. Curtis argued instead for good humor over the pointed attacks in this case, but Nast refused his advice. Ultimately, Curtis was overruled by Fletcher Harper, and Nast continued his attacks unabated. So savage was Nast's attacks in his cartoons that Harper's was dubbed a journal of degradation, while Nast was called a libelous caricature. Nast continually attacked Greeley's character, making him look as ridiculous as possible, showing him begging for votes from the Tweed ring in one cartoon, further tying the Democrats to the Tweed corruption, while Andrew Johnson looked on next to a hooded KKK member. Nast even attacked a liberal Republican's efforts for peace with the South, more or less calling it treason over hardline Republicans like him who wished to still punish the former Confederate states. That's not to say Nast still found bits for pointed humor. For example, when he was unable to find a photograph of Gratz Brown, Greeley's running mate for vice president, to use for reference, he instead just represented with a tag on Greeley's coat saying, "and Gratz Brown." Perhaps to Brown's satisfaction, his face never appeared in any of Nast's cartoons as a result, but this also gave Nast a chance to mock the inconsequentialness of the vice presidential office, along with pointing out how unpopular Brown was that no one would even recognize him. Ultimately, Ulysses S. Grant was an overwhelming victory for president, with Nast's contribution recognized nationwide. No less than Mark Twain praised Nast, writing a letter saying, "Nast, you more than any other man won a prestigious victory for Grant. I mean, rather for civilization and progress." Nast and Grant would become great friends, with their families regularly dining together until Grant's death in 1885. As for Grant's opponent Horace Greeley, he would die just a few weeks later, with some even stating he couldn't handle Nast's unrelenting attacks. Nast would inadvertently reference this in one of his last cartoons of the campaign, We Are in the Homestretch, depicting Greeley being carried off in a stretcher while a masthead bears the phrase, "the cheapest paper in the Union," in reference to Greeley's Tribune. Sadly, this cartoon appeared on October 30th, the day Greeley's wife died, which has probably contributed more to his eventual death than Nast's cartoons. The Republicans continued to show their appreciation to Nast, with Hamilton Fish, the Secretary of State, offering him a lucrative post as the official American commissioner in the Vienna Exposition, which Nast would refuse despite already having a European trip planned. In another show, MP Chipman started a testimonial fund for Nast at $10,000 to be raised with $100 subscriptions, which Nast also stopped. It helped that Nast wasn't hurting for money at this point in his career, earning a salary of $18,000 a year by 1872. He was so popular, Harper's feared he would be poached by other papers, so they paid him $5,000 a year retainer for his exclusive artistic rights, whether he produced anything or not. along with paying $150 per cartoon with no limit on how many he could produce per year. Nast also added to his income with a $10,000 speaking tour with Red Pass Boston Lyceum, despite being terrified of public speaking. Nevertheless, he was so popular that the tour was extended several months to sell out crowds, leading to an additional $40,000 in speaking fees. He would be so valuable at Harper's, he was called the Prince of Caricaturists. Despite being only 33 years old, he was a seasoned 18-year veteran in the industry. However, he would soon be past his prime in his own profession. In 1873, Thomas Nast began to suffer cramps in his hands, along with a genuine decline in health, which kept him away from his drawing board for months at a time. A trip to Europe and a Red Path lecture series also took him away from his work as well, as fame and fortune soon proved to be great distractions, as is the case with many successful people. Thus, his drawing output decreased sharply. This was noticed by his peers, with James Gordon Bennett at the New York Herald proposing a subscription fund for Nast, joking he had given up drawing to work as a singer for Shoo-Fly. Nast would reply with a cartoon Shoo-Fly, showing himself batting a fly, which he depicted as Bennett. He also replied to editor Henry Watterson at the Louisville Courier-Journal with the cartoon Meeting Nast and Watterson in Central New Jersey, a parody of his famous meeting at Stanley Livingston in Africa. When no more corrupt bosses or presidents to depict, though, Nast found himself the subject of many of his own cartoons at the time, further referencing this with the one artist occupation gone, showing himself with his hands in his pockets and nothing to do after Grant's victory. Nast wasn't helped by his devout loyalty to Grant and his administration to the point that he was forget his original campaigns against political corruption. While Grant was never personally corrupt, he presided over one of the most corrupt in U.S. history, with everyone from his vice president to Secretary of State accepting thousands of dollars in bribes over shady government dealings. Nast would attack these scandals in his cartoons, but never with vigor as before, though he did go full force against Secretary of War William W. Belknap after profiting $24,000 in selling shady supplies to Indians. However, this was moreover Belknap betraying the Army, as Nast's father was an Army man, and he would always be supportive of the military forces. Nast would continue to defend Grant himself, even producing a cartoon depicting him as a lion, with others trying to dress him up as a scapegoat. Nast would find themselves at the wrong side of public opinion, though, when it looked like Grant would run for a third term, which many considered the move to be the move of a dictator. So much so that the office of the president would be limited to 2 terms less than a century later. Following Grant, Thomas Nast helped Rutherford B. Hayes, a candidate he predicted to be nominated in the cartoon, get elected in 1876, only to not like his policies, though he did keep silent at first. Hayes would, like Lincoln and Grant before him, thank Nast for his work, helping him get elected, and even tried to arrange a $10,000 reward. Once again, Nast refused. Nast originally admired Hayes for being a former Union general and sound money man, and continued to support him through his cartoons, mostly in going after the Democratic nominee Samuel J. Tilden. Nast would even unjustly tie Tilden to Tweed, despite being one of his opponents, while the anti-Catholic sentiment in his cartoons continued. However, Nast would differ from Hayes when he pushed for bringing the South back into the United States fully, something that radical Republicans like Nast opposed. While this was meant as a part of a celebration of the United States' 100th birthday, Nast would instead produce a cartoon, The Republic in Danger, followed by others depicting a revived Democratic Party ready to take down the Republicans. In 1877, Harper's refused to publish one of his cartoons, despite already being fully produced, which led him to leave for 4 months before returning. This change came about when Fletcher Harper had passed away that year, leaving Harper's Weekly to his nephews. Joseph W. Harper Jr. and John Henry Harper, who sided more with editor George William Curtis, who believed Nast's cartoons should be more aligned with the magazine's editorial positions. By 1879, Nast had made $25,000, along with an estate valuing $125,000. Despite his disappointment in Hayes, though, Nast would continue to attack Democrats and their policies, which even included General Winfield Scott Hancock, who was a personal friend and the 1880 Democrat nominee for president. However, this time, he focused on the party as a whole, supporting Republicans while attacking Democrats, while ignoring the candidates, as not only was Hancock a friend, but James Garfield, the Republican nominee, was wrapped up in a financial scandal Nast once abhorred. Thomas Nast was starting to face competition, much of which he inspired, such as the humor magazines Puck and Judge. Puck was founded by Joseph Kepler, favored by the Democrats, while Judge was favored by the Republicans. Plus, Nast was unable to adjust to pen and ink, which Harper switched to in 1880, over pencil, while Harper's was becoming more of a family paper, concentrating more on entertainment over politics. Nast was also running out of targets to attack, with his latest one, inflation, not connecting with audiences like past scandals. Too bad he can't work today. The 1884 election did inspire Nast again, but it was short-lived, as Nast started to look for a way to become financially independent from the paper. Thomas Nast hoped to make his fortune investing $30,000 in Grant and Ward, whose partner was former President Ulysses S. Grant. At first, the company was successful with huge dividends, only for it to fail in May of 1884, shocking the country and Nast personally. It was later discovered that Grant was just a figurehead, while Ward was responsible for mismanaging the funds, but it disillusioned Nast just the same, as he had put so much faith in the grant. Perhaps a bigger surprise came in 1884 when Nast found himself supporting the Democratic nominee for president over the Republican, James G. Blaine, mainly due to his personal dislike of him. As early as 1879, Nast had published a cartoon attacking his policy on Chinese exclusion. This actually aligned with Harper's at the time, as editor George William Curtis, despite being a Republican convention delegate, led the repudiation of the Republican ticket as part of the liberal reform faction of the party, preferring to no less than the Democrats over seeing Blaine elected. This was a natural backlash to Nast doing this, as he had been a proud supporter of the Republican Party for so long, with the magazine Judge attacking him with cartoons that used his previous drawings against him. Ultimately, the Democrat nominee, Grover Cleveland, won, the first since 1856, along with being the first that Nast openly supported, which he counted as another personal victory. However, it did come at a financial cost, as Harper's lost $50,000 from Republican support. Ultimately, Nast ended his run at Harper's in 1886 with a Christmas cartoon. It was a loss for both, as the artist and the paper made a brilliant partnership, with Nast getting a national forum while Harper's had a political voice. However, Harper's was already changing to a more family paper, while Nast was seeing the end of his career. Thomas Nast would later collect his drawings in a book, Christmas Drawings of the Human Race, in 1890. Nast's depiction of Santa Claus, which first appeared in 1862 as part of a campaign during the Civil War, would set the modern standard for the character, which is based on the poem The Night Before Christmas. As he did with symbols for the Republican and Democratic parties, Nast's version of Santa Claus has endured to this day, with very few alterations since. Nast also made a minor contribution to the picture of Uncle Sam, the human symbol of the United States, adding a goatee to his face, which has remained to this day. In 1892, Thomas Nast attempted to launch his own magazine, inheriting the New York Gazette, which he acquired after it went into bankruptcy, changing it to Nast's Weekly, mortgaging his own home to do so. With this new venture, Nast attempted to support Benjamin Harrison for the election as President of the United States. It would fail after 7 months later, shortly after Harrison lost the election, leaving Nast with thousands of dollars in debt. Nevertheless, he remained a popular artist, with President Theodore Roosevelt being a longtime admirer, calling Nast our best teacher. In response, Nast sent Roosevelt an oil painting of Santa Claus for his children in 1901. Roosevelt later offered Nast a position as U.S. Consul General in Guayaquil, Ecuador, in South America, which he accepted, leading to him to travel to the country on July 1st of 1902. This would be a fatal decision, as yellow fever had broken out in the country, though Nast would stay on his job for months, helping numerous American officials and business representatives escape the disease. However, Thomas Nast would contract the disease himself, leading to his death on December 7th, 1902. His body was returned to the United States and interred at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx of New York City. Thomas Nast would leave behind a long legacy of political cartoons, essentially establishing the modern standard to this day. However, his depiction of Irish and immigrants in general has led to some backlash, with his being rejected from the New Jersey Hall of Fame in 2011 because of it. The Thomas Nast Award, created in 1968 by the Overseas Press Club, was awarded to the best editorial cartoons concerning international affairs, but in 2018 his name was removed from the award to his best depiction due to his depiction of immigrants. The Thomas Nast Prize is still awarded by the Thomas Nast Foundation, presenting an award to the best German and best North American cartoonist every year since 1978, with one of its committee members being its descendant, Thomas Nast III. Of note, the word nasty does not originate from Thomas Nast's name, as that word had been recorded long before, since the 1400s, with its origins being unknown. And that is a rambling and too brief biography of the great Thomas Nast, the creator of the modern political cartoon, along with numerous other symbols that we take for granted today, from political parties to Christmas itself. He was a talent like no other, despite his bigotry in some areas, and cartoonists to this day continue to work in his shadow. I would like to thank the chief source for these episodes, Thomas Nast, Political Cartoonist by John Chalmers Vinson, a fantastic biography that with some beautiful reproductions of many of Nast's best cartoons. A must-read for any cartoon fan.
My name is Mark McCrae, and I'm the author of The Best Saturdays of Our Lives.
I'm Dan Klink, co-host of the Best Saturdays of Our Lives podcast.
The Best Saturdays of Our Lives features programming trends from the 1966 television season all the way through the last hurrah of the early digital age of the 1990s.
On the show, if it's animated, we talk about it.
Order your signed copy today at tbsool.com.
And listen to the podcast at esonetwork.com and all podcast platforms.
Now is September 7th, 2023, time for the favorite comic book of the week. Birds of Prey, #1 by Kelly Thompson and Leonardo Romero, which is a new series that finds Black Canary assembling a new Birds of Prey team, which is essentially some of the best female DC superheroes to go on a clandestine mission to save her sister Sin. And this new team consists of Cassandra Cain, Batgirl, Harley Quinn, Big Barda, and Zealot, who of course is originally from the Wildcats Wildstorm universe, but now has been incorporated into DC. And it's slowly revealed as why she's assembling this particular team, why they can't have Barbara Gordon Batgirl in this, and what the real mission is. Thompson does a great job just reestablishing these characters. It's a great, almost like a woman on a mission story, to getting the team together and going off to do it. And also, there's a reason why they're all females, as revealed in the end too. And Romero's art has a great action-packed, almost cartoony style to it. You get to see Cassandra Cain show off her fighting skills. And this looks to be a lot of fun. It's great to see the Birds of Prey back again. It's always been one of DC's better books when done right. Of course, the original was the original Oracle leading Huntress and Black Canary on their missions. And great read in general. So you want to check out a new team book? Check out the Birds of Prey #1. And with that, we'll conclude with this biography of the life of Thomas Nast. Join me again next week for a new episode of the History of Comics podcast. And until then, go out and enjoy yourself a good comic book.